Gohmert is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Speaker Bowman. I appreciate that. Folks, it is my absolute honor and privilege to be here tonight to honor one of our very own Texans who has been here for 18 years. I'm calling this the Louie Gohmert Special Order Hour, but when you realize how many hours he's been up here, probably more than anybody else we know, it doesn't seem to give it the fitting title. You know, there's no better way to honor my good friend Louie Gohmert. If you see the picture over here, he's been on Fox News. He's a great drinker of Dr. Pepper, M&M peanuts, and all the things that Louie Gohmert is known for. I had a friend the other day said, you know, Louie can be pushy and obstinate. And I said, really? I said, and my friend said, yeah, but he's actually the opposite now. He's obstinate and pushy. So I tell you what, Louie Gohmert speaks his mind. He comes to this floor. He says a lot of the things, quite frankly, that we're thinking, you know, but a lot of people are not gutsy enough to say it. He's been a true patriot. He's a champion for Texas' 1st District, and he's a fighter for everyone's freedoms. Louie, we're going to miss you. Louie, could I impose upon you to come down front here? He's had quite a distinguished career since before he got into Congress, and then when he got what I like to say demoted to Congress. Ronald Reagan once said, infamously in a campaign, he will not make age an issue of the campaign. He was not going to exploit for political purposes his opponent's youth and inexperience. And talking about youth, Louie doesn't look like he's 69, does he? But I remember when he did. And I'll tell you what, he's a great friend of ours. Y'all didn't know this is going to be a roast, right? He's been a great friend of ours. Before I ever knew him, I saw him on Fox News so much of the time. Did she bring you Dr. Pepper? I saw him on Fox News so much of the time, and I always looked up to him. I knew that he was a man of conviction. He was a Christian. He spoke the truth the way it was. And I really looked up to him. So, you know, when I came to Congress, I kind of confided in him. I said, Louie, I'm beginning to have dreams. I keep seeing talking crickets, talking dogs, talking birds, talking cats, and even talking donkeys and elephants. What's wrong with me? You think Congress is pressuring me? He said, no, you're just having Disney spells. Come on, that's funny, guys. Ba-boop-ba. Louie's always had a great sense of humor. He's always been someone that it was so wry and so right on with things. I always loved having a conversation with him. Louie, we appreciate you. I cannot tell you how much we appreciate you and what you tried to do for Texas, by the way. And I hope tonight will show through a little bit and a lot of our appreciation for you. You've never backed down for a fight for our freedoms. You've never backed down from fighting for our democracy. You've never backed down because sometimes the truth is hard to hear. Even if you sent the media into a frenzy quite a few times, I always admired that about you. To say that you're going to leave big shoes is an understatement. I mean, who else in the history, we might want to look this up, Chairman Bowman, who else in the history of this House has spent 17,340 minutes, 289 hours, and 12 days speaking on the House floor? Who else has done that? Probably nobody but our famous Louie Gohmert. But you know what? Louie, you're going to leave a legacy of fighting tirelessly for what is good and right for the people you represent, not just in Texas, but in this country. Religious freedom not being the least of those, and we appreciate that about you. You've not only fought tirelessly for the people you represent, but you have fought for every single conservative. You know what? There's a lot of people who will never be able to vote for Louie Gohmert, but he voted for them every day, and we appreciate that about you, Louie. You will leave Congress you will be known for unapologetically fighting for and leading the conservative movement. Nobody has represented the conservative movement better than you have, Louie Gohmert. And I want to tell you, with your stance for our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and for Christian values, you leave some really big boots to fill. So thank you for all your hard work. We have a lot of friends here that want to say good things about you. They won't be as rough on you as I was, probably. And at this time, I want to yield good friend to my good friend Chip Roy, for what, minute and a half, 2 minutes. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. You got it. I yield 2 minutes, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I thank the gentleman from Texas. Thank my friend, and I'm proud to be here on the floor with my friend from Texas. He is someone that I've looked up to for a very long time, and to have served with him for the last 2 terms, for the last 4 years, has been an honor. I wouldn't be in Congress but for his support. My parents lived just down the road from Pittsburgh, where he grew up. They lived in Mount Pleasant, Texas. It's actually when I first got to meet Congressman Gohmert. And now to sit and serve in this body alongside of him, it truly is an honor. The poster talks about the Gohmert Hour. We used to make our interns watch the Gohmert Hour so they could learn from the great Louie Gohmert. One of the favorite moments, of course, was when he spent 30 minutes hammering the architect of the Capitol because they told him not to grill his ribs on his office balcony. One of the greatest speeches delivered on the floor of the House, no doubt. And look, we already talked about 17,000 minutes or whatever the number was, 12 days. I took to heart watching the passion of Congressman Gohmert coming to the floor of the House and using this floor to speak to the people, and using this floor to be able to communicate why we're here. We ought to do it more often. In fact, we ought to have debate and engagement with our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And I was inspired by Congressman Gohmert to use this privilege, to use this time that we're given to be able to be the voice for the people who send us to Washington. And that is what Congressman Gohmert has done. He's been a voice for the people of East Texas. He has represented them well. He is truly one of the most honest, honorable, and decent public servants that I've ever known. The reason that he's leaving this body has a great deal to do with his honor and his integrity and wanting to defend the people of Texas and to do it the right way. I will miss you, Louie, but I know you're not going to be too far away. I will leave you with this. During a speech in one of the famous Gohmert Hours, Congressman Gohmert said, quote, "His SAT score would shock people who think I'm the dumbest member of Congress." Well, nothing could be farther from the truth. He is one of the smartest members, one of the best lawyers, one of the best human beings. It's been an honor to serve alongside you, my friend. We will see you soon in other areas of life. God bless you.
The gentleman yields back. I appreciate that, Mr. Roy. And at this time, I will represent our good friend from Virginia, Mr. Bob Good, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. And Louie Gohmert is just as popular among my constituents in Virginia as he is among my esteemed colleagues, constituents from Texas. Louie was one of the first members of Congress to come and support me in my district when I started this journey 3 years ago, and he literally drove through the night to come down to Virginia to help a fledgling, aspiring congressman down in the 5th District of Virginia. Louie, since I've gotten here, has been an example of courage, and I quickly observed him as a freshman being willing to go to the microphone time and again, not only to challenge the other side, but even to challenge our side when he felt they were wrong or weren't living up to the ideals that we promised to live up to as our constituents. I have admired him for his character and for his testimony on a personal level, his love for the Lord, for his love for our Savior Jesus Christ. Louie Gohmert is one of those people you meet here in Congress who's the same here in person as he is on TV when folks watch him. And I am proud to learn from and serve with my true, courageous, conservative warrior. I'm proud to call Louie a friend on a personal level. He will be missed, and even in his leaving this Congress, he's leaving in a courageous, selfless act because he could have stayed here as long as he wanted to represent his district, but he loves his beloved state of Texas, and in a tremendous act of courage, he took personal risk in leaving this body. He's had a lifetime of service, from being an Army captain to be a judge to being Chief Justice of the Supreme Court there in Texas. And he's had 18 years of courageous conservative service here in Washington. Thank you, Louie. I admire you, and I love you, and I'm proud to call you a friend. God bless you. And I yield back.
And I thank the gentleman. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Representative Bishop for 2 minutes.
Thank you. I thank the gentleman. That'd be just great. And I don't know if I can fill up 2 minutes. One of the things that I do want to say about Louie Gohmert, though, is that Louie is a hero to many, many Americans, and he is a hero to me. One of the pretty heady things about walking onto the floor of the United States House of Representatives is that you meet these people you've seen on your screens, television screens across the country that you've heard from, that have spoken the words that you wish you could have spoken. And Louie was one of the first heroes I met. Now, you meet some people who are not necessarily heroes, too, here. But Louie was a hero that I met maybe my first day walking on the floor. And he, others, you know, there's another thing about this place is that sometimes everything's been said, not everybody said it, but there are moments that having the opportunity to join the chorus is as important as anything I can think of. And to Louie Gohmert, I say thank you for being a hero. Thank you for always being a loyal fighter for freedom. You know, all of us seem to fail. And sometimes at the moment we're most needed. Louie, you've never failed. You have persisted. And while sometimes I am uncertain how to fill up the time, you will stand on this floor and you will rely on your inner substance, and you can lay it out as long as you need to go to communicate to the American people, to communicate on their behalf, to say what matters. I don't know what we'll do without you. God bless you, Louie Gohmert. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman yielding back. This time it's my pleasure to yield to Michael Cloud 2 minutes.
Sounds good.
You're up.
I appreciate it. Louie, we're going to miss you. You're my fellow Texan, House colleague, and of course, it's been an honor to get to know you and to now be able to call you as a friend. I will definitely miss Louie Hour at the end of every week. We will definitely miss the ribs that are certainly worth a congressional mention in the record. But I remember the first time I met you, and I was a Texan, just grassroots, and you inspired me. I remember you speaking about the things that you were working to accomplish up here, and it was obvious a few things. One, that you hadn't forgotten who you were working for. It was obvious to me that you were compelled by your love for the Constitution and these founding principles our nation were built upon, and you were motivated by your deep and abiding faith. And those things resonated with me just as someone trying to make a difference where I could, and ultimately didn't know I was going to have the opportunity to be here and, of course, get to know you. And it's truly an honor to see and to watch your service. You've been a happy warrior who stands up, doesn't flinch, stands for what's right, what's just, and again, you haven't forgotten why you've been here. We've all seen people who can kind of get used to it, get comfortable to what's going on here. You haven't done that. You've stayed true. You've stayed true, and it's an honor to know you, and I just want to thank you for being a hero in this place on behalf of our nation, on behalf of our state. Thanks so much. God bless you. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. It's now my privilege to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Bill Posey.
Thank you for yielding. Louie, the first person who reached her hand out to me when I got here was not you, it was Ron Paul. You were the second one, and got to know you good through Ron Paul's lunches, his wonderful lunches at his Liberty Caucus, and learned before I had ever heard you speak of what a true patriot you were. Don't know that there's ever been a more consistent member here since I've been here on principles, on policy, and on ethics than you, Louie Gohmert. You've been a fearless voice for those that were voiceless, something which every member of Congress should aspire to be. You've been an advocate for what is right about America and a fierce opponent of what's not right for America. Congressman Gohmert, you've always been well informed on a galaxy of issues that come before this body. And as always, you've been more than well prepared to fight for the good and against the bad. An honest, pragmatic, free thinker for sure, Congress could surely use more Louie Gohmerts, not less. We're going to miss you, Louie. Godspeed. Just don't know what we're going to do without you. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and at this time it is my pleasure to yield to Mr. Thomas Massey of Kentucky 2 minutes.
Thank the gentleman from Texas. There's not a more fierce fighter than Louie Gohmert in this House, and if you have a bigger heart than Louie Gohmert and you're serving in this House, I haven't met you yet. I'm sorry. I need to find you because I haven't found anybody with the heart the size of Louie Gohmert's. One of the measures, I think, of a member here is how they treat their staff and how their staff responds to the member. And Louie Gohmert attracts the best talent of anybody in this chamber, and they love him. We love Louie Gohmert. I remember my first week in Congress, I was in conference, and we were going to elect a speaker. And nobody was challenging Speaker Boehner, and Louie Gohmert got up to nominate somebody else. And he reminded us all that you didn't have to be a member of the House to be nominated for Speaker. And I was just praying that he didn't nominate Ron Paul because I knew I would have to second that nomination. And I leaned to the person next to me and I said, "Who is that guy making that nomination?" He said, "Oh, that's Louie Gohmert. He's crazy." Well, within a week, I realized Louie Gohmert was the only sane man in this chamber. And for 10 years, he's been guiding me. He has a photographic memory. Sharp as a whip, but a photographic memory. He's like an encyclopedia of everything that has happened in this chamber while he was here before I got here. So one day in conference, they were telling us, look, when the quarterback calls the play and snaps the ball, you don't execute another play. And they were imploring us to do something, frankly, that wasn't in the best interests of the people from Tyler, Texas. And I asked Louie, nor the interests of the people from Kentucky. I asked Louie, what are you going to do when the quarterback snaps the ball? He said, when the quarterback snaps the ball and runs for the wrong end zone, I'm not obligated to block for him. In fact, I might have to tackle him. So Louie Gohmert has never been afraid to go against the grain when it means supporting the people from Texas 1st District, and that's the people that I want to thank for loaning us Louie Gohmert, for having the good discernment to send him to Congress and to send him back. America has benefited from the good judgment of the people in Texas's 1st District, and we're going to miss you sorely. Very much, Louie. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for yielding back. And Thomas, you came in with me in 2012, as I recall. And my second term, I was just a little bit of history here. When Louie Gohmert decided to throw his name in the hat for Speaker, I was knowing him, believing to know him and his character, I said, I'm all in, Louie. It turned out that I was part of the Gohmert caucus of 3 that voted for him for Speaker. Paid a price for it, of course, but Louie stood firm. Jim Bridenstine was the other one. And since they vote alphabetically, Bridenstine voted for Gohmert, Gohmert voted for Gohmert. We already knew who the Speaker was going to be. It gets to the W's. Bridenstine's texting me and saying, don't leave us hanging. I said, I told Louie I was all on board. I'm all on board. So Weber put that Gohmert name up there. He's been a fighter. Thank you, Thomas. That's a great remembrance. He's been a fighter and was always willing to put himself out there. It's my pleasure now to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Pete Sessions.
Congressman Weber, thank you very much, not only for preparing this opportunity for us to honor our colleague and a member who will be leaving this body after a number of years, the great Judge and Congressman Louie Gohmert. I rise tonight not just to honor Louie Gohmert, but to probably say some things that not many members can say, and that is, I know Tyler, Texas, and I know Tyler, Texas well. I know many people there, and each of them not only speak well of Louie Gohmert, but are pleased with his performance. They enjoy not only his representation, but they believe that he's a man who came to this town knowing who he is and will leave this town knowing who he is. And it would be the same person that came as the same person that's leaving. You know this, Judge Gohmert, but I have the honor to take part of your congressional district that through redistricting has changed, and it gives me a time to come and reflect upon not only your friends in East Texas, Angelina County, and certainly places that are Crockett and Huntsville is a little bit south of the district, but they asked me the other day when I was in Huntsville, do you know Louie Gohmert? Because we were kind of thinking that before he said he was leaving, that he was going to come down here and be our congressman. And I said, well, that's the same thing they say in Lufkin and Nacogdoches. They say that in Crockett. They say that in Waco. And so there were a lot of fans all over Central Texas that not only admire Louie, but he speaks very eloquently about the things that are on their mind, that are front and center on his mind. So for your friends in Waco, for your friends in Dallas, for your friends in Huntsville, certainly across the district that you represent, Louie Gohmert has not only made a name, but has, with his great passion and articulation, struck the heart of many people in Texas who deeply believe that Texas is special, that America is the greatest place in the world, and that we want to be one nation under God for as long as we can stay there. And Judge Gohmert, you're going to be missed, but I look forward to catching up with you often and letting you know that there are a lot of people who thought you did a great job and did it well and are proud of you. I yield back my time to the gentleman from Texas.
And I thank the gentleman for yielding back, and I'll echo that, Congressman Sessions, that our district loves Louie Gohmert. He was invited to speak. Unfortunately, his calendar wouldn't always permit it, but we did finally get him to come speak to us. And our District 14 on the Gulf, I'm not sure we could have drawn your district that far down to the south, but there's a lot of people who would have sure loved that. And now I'm going to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Montana.
Thank you. Thank you very much. A lot of people have been speaking a lot of wonderful high praise about Louie. I will tell you, I met Louie before I arrived in Congress, and I am a freshman, so I haven't had the opportunity to spend as much time with him as many of you have. But before I got here, Louie sat me down, and he told me a story. He was out in Montana doing an event for another member of Congress. And he said, you know, he told me this story. He says, I used to be a judge. I was a judge there in East Texas. And he said, one of the big cases that I had came before me when it was right before an election. And he said every other judge that had this case presented to them, they had recused themselves because they didn't want to have their fingerprints on it because it was a big problem. It was a man and a wife. There was a domestic problem. There was a murder involved. Half of the town supported the husband. Half of the town supported the wife. And there wasn't a judge around that wanted to get involved in the situation. And Louie said, I thought about it. And he said, I went to prayer that evening, and I was really struggling whether I needed to pick this case up or not, whether I needed to pick that fight or not. And he said, the next morning I got up and knew what I had to do. And he said, it came to me. The words from the Holy Spirit came to me. Said, you can't run from what you ran for. You can't run from what you ran for. And I have carried that message with me as I walk into this chamber on a daily basis because there are so many people that are afraid to do the right thing. And they know what is right. And they walk away, and they hide, and they get other people to help them explain their way out of it. But there is a right, and there is a wrong on what we do up here. And Louie Gohmert personifies a man who is willing to stand up and say, this is what's right, and this is what's wrong, and we don't need a deep explanation about it. It's really rather simple. And don't run from what you ran for. It's difficult issues that we are addressing every single day, and this is why we were sent here. They tell us all that we are honorable when we get here. You get letters in the mail, the Honorable Matt Rosendale, the Honorable Weber, the Honorable Higgins. Yeah, the Honorable Biggs. It's not so important when you get here to be called honorable as when you leave. If you can still be addressed as honorable. And I will stand here and tell everyone that Louie Gohmert will be considered honorable when he leaves this place, and I am honored to call you my friend. God bless you, and please come and kill a turkey on my place next year. I yield back.
I think, gentlemen, it is now my time, my honor to yield to somebody that is honorable, to the gentleman from Arizona. 2 minutes.
Thank you. I thank the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Weber. It is really an incredible thing to be here. Before I came to Congress, I'd heard of Louie Gohmert. I had no idea that he would be a friend, nor how iconoclastic he is. He is a one-of-a-kind American. And I'll just tell you, I'm not going to tell you, I got a volume of stories. I mean, the way he eats a donut, for instance, we could talk about this, all of these things. I won't do that. But he was larger than life. He is a fearless conservative. He's been on the front lines fearlessly fighting. His memory, Thomas Massey was talking about, it's copious. It's encyclopedic. And you can never go wrong with saying, hey, Louie, what happened here? And because he's going to know. He has been a friend of the friendless and a champion who offers the balm of Gilead to those who have a lost cause. He's just been an iconoclastic individual. He's going to be missed terribly. I'll tell you what, Louie, we're going to miss you. Your personality, your fun, your joie de vivre, all the things. That's French, Louis. You might not have recognized that, but I mean that your love of life, all the things that you brought to us. But we're going to miss your guitar playing, a little bit anyway. We're really going to miss your ribs. I don't know if anybody else is going to be able to smoke some ribs up on the balcony of the office building over there. Maybe not, but we're sure going to miss him. But we're going to miss you, my friend. God bless you. Godspeed.
Well, I thank you for those kind words, Representative Biggs. And if you'll get with me later, I'll give you some of those stories and all that we all admire and cherish about Congressman Gohmert. And so we appreciate that, Mr. Biggs, and thank you for those kind words. And at this time, it's my pleasure to yield to my neighbor to the east of me, Mr. Clay Higgins, a couple of minutes.
I thank my colleague. I'm so honored to speak on behalf of the people of the country that we serve, the oath that we've sworn, and bid some words of adoration and respect for our brother and friend, Louie Gohmert. I've described Louie as a living founding father to those that have inquired as to whether I've known him, which from sea to shining sea. It's a common question as we travel in service to we the people. We're asked, do you know this fellow or do you know that lady? And it's quite common to be asked, do you know Louie Gohmert? And I'm honored to say yes. Louie has represented not just the people of his district and by extension the nation that we love and we've sworn to serve, but he has represented the foundational core principles that gave birth to our nation. In Matthew, the words of the Lord stated, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied." You, my brother Louie, you should feel satisfied within your soul, good sir, because you have brought the very essence of pure principle and spirit to this great body. This chamber shall forever resonate with your words and your love for God and country. I'm honored to have worked with you, to call you brother and friend. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield my time.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. We're going to give the two gentlemen a chance here to express their love for one another. Mr. Speaker, I have watched Louie Gohmert for a long time. So much could be said about him. So much has been said about him. Some of it even true. You know, having Louie for one of my very, very good friends gives me status. And, you know, I had a friend in the 5th grade that gave me the measles, and this is a lot better deal. Let me just tell you that. Louie's got a great sense of humor. He's a great patriot. He's a great Christian. We all know that. We've seen him stand for our biblical values time and time and time again. Maybe it sounds a little archaic or a little corny, I don't know, but I think of Roosevelt and his great speech when he said, and it's called The Man in the Arena, because, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Speaker, it does apply to Louie Gohmert. He's in our arena. He's our fighter. And I remind folks, President Roosevelt said, it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there's no effort without error and shortcoming, but who actually strives to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph. At the best, Louie Gohmert, the triumph and the end of high achievement. And at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. My good friend Louie Gohmert did not fail, has not failed, will not fail. If it fails, the president went on, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory or defeat. Someone who is heavily involved in a situation that requires courage, skill, or tenacity, as opposed to sitting on the sidelines. And the president went on. I will tell you that nothing has discouraged Louie Gohmert. Nothing has laid him down in the defeat of the dust, as President Roosevelt described it. He has been a tireless fighter, Louie. You and I have been through a lot of battles. We've seen a lot of things, and some of it we just shake our heads at. But ultimately, we know who's in control. We know that you've done the Lord's bidding. We know that you fought the good fight. We know that you have endured till the end. We know that you have been a sterling example of what President Reagan called a light on a hill. I forget exactly how he said it. But you're one of those points of lights. I think George H.W. used that analogy, that for the rest of us members in Congress could learn from, that people watching on TV, on C-SPAN, and out in America could learn from. Never doubted where you stood, never doubted what you stood for or who you stood for. And I can't tell you how proud I am to be called your friend and to know that. We're going to miss you, but you will not be I have an idea you won't be a stranger. We'll get to see you come back. If nothing else, I still got to get that ribs recipe from you. Still got to get the trademark and that rib recipe from you, the patent on it. You know, in Texas 14, just like your district, we love God, we love our America, we love our freedom, we love our family, we love our guns. And Louie, you have done a tireless, spectacular job of defending all of those, and it shows. You know, we believe what the Bible says. Quite frankly, He made them male and female. a lot of biblical principles. You have stood up for those, for our Lord Jesus Christ, every bit of the way. You know, if you just, and having been the Texas Supreme Court justice, if you'd have told me that on our Supreme Court some of them wouldn't even know what a woman was. From Texas, we just don't get that, do we? We understand what the Bible says. If you'd have told me, if you and I had sit down there 10 years ago and said that the left would be trying to destroy fossil fuels, the things that make our country so great, that we fight for so diligently in Texas, we wouldn't have believed it. You and I have watched a lot of things come down the pike. So I could sit here and go all night and all day. I believe we do have the leader coming in eventually to come and to also share a few words. But Louie, if you don't mind, I'd like to yield you some time to just kind of give your thoughts and let us continue and right now learn from you yet some more. I yield to you, my good friend up there, you betcha, Judge Gohmert.
I'm so grateful to my fellow Texan, and not saying it lightly, dear friend, with whom a lot of battles have been fought. And I can also honestly say that in my 18 years here, I've never been more uncomfortable on the floor than I have been listening to these comments. I had no idea, I've never asked, I had no idea how much time, if I could yield to the gentleman, is that really right, how much I've spoken?
If the gentleman will yield for just a second.
Yes.
Yeah, the gentleman will yield. Louie, we don't have enough time to talk about how much time that you've actually spent here.
That was
so the floor. It is what your staff said, and it was already pointed out tonight. You do such a great job of hiring competent staff. So absolutely, you better believe it's right. So we're proud of you for that.
Well, thank you. When I came to Congress, I seen that the country was in trouble, and having been a history student and loved history, I knew no republic lasts forever. I knew we were about to the extent of the length of time that republics come and go. And I'd hoped to, while here, didn't expect to be here 18 years, but I'd hoped that when I left, I could feel we had perpetuated that liberty for at least another generation, hopefully much more. But as I sat here listening to the gracious comments, I was taken right back to Ben Franklin's speech in the in the Constitutional Convention, 1787. After they couldn't agree on much, but his words, I've lived, sir, a long time, and the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth. God governs in the affairs of men. And if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it possible an empire could rise without his aid? We've been assured, sir, in the sacred writing, that unless the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. And it just seems to me that we have much less concern or desire overall for having the Lord help build the house. And I know historically what that means. So I've been deeply encouraged on seeing the people that have come in since I did, and especially in recent years. And I'm taking great heart from the fact that we've got some fighters that have come in. And if I've helped inspire some, as they said, that's something I can take with me. But I will continue to follow what goes on here, help any way I can, and am very grateful. I see my dear friend from Louisiana, and I thank God that he brought him through his brush with death, because we've been better for him being here. But I thank you, and I thank all of those who've spoken tonight. Yield back.
Well, I thank the gentleman for yielding back. And Louie, I do want to mention that we want to say a great love and affection for Kathy, your bride, for loaning you to us. I know it's a sacrifice for her. And as you pointed out, we've got a great leader, and it's my privilege to yield to the leader such time as he may consume.
Well, thank the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Weber, for yielding and for organizing this tribute to my dear friend, Louie Gohmert. We will miss you in this chamber, but I have nothing but great memories of Louie, and you expressed so many prayers for me in tough times, but also the things you would do, and I see on the poster the ribs, because that's what I think of, when Louie Gohmert would offer to the members to cook ribs for them at the end of a long night. And we've got a lot of heady debates here. We sometimes spar with each other, and at the end of that battle, to bring people together and say, you know what, we're gonna eat some ribs. And by the way, they're really, really good. He's never given the recipe. I'm working on that. I think you ought to pass the recipe on so we can keep that tradition going. If nothing else, we won't enter it in the congressional record, but just the season and the rub that you put on it the night before. But it's one of those things that helps bring members together, because there are a lot of times where it's easy to get on different sides and people are battling on different issues, but to come together at the end of that, and that's something I will always remember, because at the end of those long evenings, there would be 50 to 100 members of Congress in those little offices enjoying that camaraderie. It wasn't just the ribs and the Shinerbach beer you brought, but it was the camaraderie more than anything, and that's one thing we need more of. We're going to have disagreements. We always have since the founding of our great nation, but to be able to come together at the end of each of those and remember the bond that joins us, that is much more powerful. And with that, I yield back to my friend and thank my dear friend Louie Gohmert for his service here to the United States Congress.
If the gentleman yield, I'd like the record to reflect that after 5 years or so of cooking ribs on the gutter or balcony, whatever you want to call it, Cannon, architect of the Capitol, had decreed I couldn't do that anymore and found a provision that indicated that. But it was Steve Scalise of Louisiana that went to bat with the powers here that ultimately allowed me to start cooking ribs again. And I will always be grateful, because that is maybe the only time I ever left a good taste in people's mouth. So I'm very grateful to Steve for helping make that happen. You were the one that facilitated that. I'm grateful. I yield back.
Well, I thank the gentleman, and I want the record to reflect that, if I can say this, I'm going to get a commitment out to get that recipe for those ribs. Did you want to talk? And so it's now my pleasure to yield to the gentleman in Colorado. 2 minutes.
Thank you, Representative Weber. And Louie, I sat next to you for many years, up to 16 years, I think, in natural resources, or one or two removed from you. And at the end, we were right next to each other. And you would give me a lot of quips during hearings and during witness testimony. And one thing you always struck me as being is a happy warrior. A warrior in the sense that you are passionate and committed to your conservative views, and you're happy about it. You have good humor. We just saw a minute ago you poked fun at yourself in a humorous way. So I just that combination is very rare, and we need more of that. We need people that are happy and positive and have good humor, and you have all of those attributes. I won't go into these stories because it would take forever to give the background, but you remember some times in Israel, we were together like floating in the Dead Sea, or you found the cat, the dead cat, or other things like that. You know, there's stories we could go into, and I won't do that. But it's been a real honor serving with you, and I wish you the best. The people of East Texas have been very well represented, and I'm sure they'll have to make do with somebody else, and they'll eventually like that person, but they're going to truly miss you, and you'll be missed here. Wish you the best, and Godspeed. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman for yielding back. It's now my honor to recognize the gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Miller, for 2 minutes.
Today, we honor Congressman Louie Gohmert and his years of service to the 1st District of Texas. I left the event I was at and rushed over here. I appreciate you so much. Actually, Louie, you know, you were the first congressperson I met. So warm and encouraging and friendly. And I appreciate how you initiated and always there to be helpful. Representative Gohmert, you've been a strong fighter for our constitutional freedoms of religion and speech, states' rights, Second Amendment rights, and more. You've been an inspiration to members of this body, including myself, and you will be missed. And oh my, the best ribs I ever ate. I need that recipe. You said you'd give it to me. Thank you, Congressman Gohmert, for your dedication to our nation and for all the hard work protecting the American way of life for future generations. You and I have talked how much we care about future generations, what we're leaving them. May God bless you and your family. My prayers will be with you as you transition to your next endeavor. Thank you.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding back. It sounds as if your ribs probably need to be trademarked or patented or whatever it takes to get that out. And we just can't say enough, Louie. We've got most other people. It's amazing that Miss Mary Miller would would rush over here. I thought when she said that, I thought, wow, that's commitment. But then I thought, no, that's love. It is commitment, and that's love for Louie Gohmert. It's respect, it's honor, it's us wanting to say you are a tower among those people who have ever darkened these doors and been in this place. And I can't say thank you enough. I want the same guarantee that I get the recipe. Otherwise, I'll have to hack into her computer and get that recipe for those ribs. And I just can't say enough. We've got a couple of people. Hopefully, Dr. Brian Babin and Jody Arrington will be here shortly. And so if you want to take this time, Louie, and go ahead and lay out all the ingredients and the deal, we can all write it down. So, but please come share some more from your heart while we wait. We just can't tell you how grateful we are to be able to spend this time with you. I yield to you.
Well, obviously, the the people that I have to thank, in addition to my family, Kathy is, well, I don't think I could have gotten elected without her help, both running for judge and then for Congress. And my girls have put up with so very much. They've taken abuse for my positions and things I've said and done, fought for. But I have always felt that I was the most fortunate member of Congress because of whom I got to represent the people of East Texas. We're so blessed in Texas, and I'm really blessed. They took a chance. 9 of our 12 counties had not elected a Republican for Congress, and I am grateful that they took a chance on me. So I'll always be grateful to the people of East Texas. My service is not over. It'll be in a different capacity. You know, one of the things that's really bothered me during my time is other Christians saying, Louie, we don't have to worry, God's in control. And that's so frustrating. And I love what friend Pastor Tommy Nelson says, just because God's in control doesn't mean he wants us to lean on our shovel and pray for a hole, because he gave us all tools and expects us to use the tools. While we're praying, that's fine, but use what he gave us. And we've heard from people that have done that, and there's so many more that are tied up other places, but it really has been an inspiration to me to see the people that are coming in, that have come in, like those we've heard from, smart, ethical, care deeply about America and about America's future. And so that is an encouragement to me, and I'm so glad I got to glimpse that. Well, and actually when I decided I had to at least try, as late as I got into the race for Attorney General, I knew, I'd seen, I'd heard, I'd become friends with people that I knew were going to be fighting for what's right. And we don't have to agree on everything. It was an honor for me to know Bobby Rush, and even though some gave me grief because I did not vote initially for his Emmett Till bill, because I was for it, but then when they cut the maximum sentence back to 10 years, that was just such short change. As a former judge, I couldn't imagine being limited to 10 years in sentencing somebody involved in some conspiracy like that to do something as horrible. And so I was very pleased when, because of Congressman Rush's constant, never giving up, continuing to push, we got a bill that was more deserving of his name and Emmett Till's name. But there have been great opportunities, and I know there are good people here, and I will continue to pray for this body, and I'm just thankful that I've gotten to serve with the folks here. I yield back.
Thank you for that, Judge. It's my pleasure now to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman behind me here. Come on, Russ.
Mr. Speaker. Well, it is 2022 in the U.S. Congress. We have crises with inflation and energy and homeland security. We've got issues with the border, the Ukrainian invasion, and the list goes on. The only thing higher than the degree of partisanship is our national debt. The only thing lower than congressional approval is confidence in the president. So why would anybody want to serve at a time like this? There tends to be two types of congressional members, those with a personal agenda, typically one that places themselves in the title of congressman at the forefront, and those who sincerely desire to serve Americans and protect the divine principles our nation was founded upon. Louie Gohmert is clearly in the latter category. Time after time, when personal liberties were being challenged and taxpayer money misused, Christian values maligned, Louie Gohmert would stand. And with his unrivaled passion, he would state his case. Mr. Gohmert, you are that rare type of member our founders had hoped would sit in this chamber in the future. You made your constituents proud. You honored biblical guidelines for governance. Thank you. It is an honor to call you friend. You will be missed. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for yielding back. And Russ, you're exactly correct. Louie Gohmert has stood strong against abortion. The judge has stood strong against the Green New Deal and the destruction of the fossil fuel industry that makes America great. We've got to have fossil fuel so that our enemies around the world cannot just overrun us with their military might. Judge Gohmert has fought for any attempt to do away with gun rights. He's been a great soldier in that regard. He's fought against this administration's attempt to keep the borders open and all that means, whether it's killing 100,000 Americans a year with fentanyl, 300 a day. And just imagine, folks, if you would, 300 Americans a day is like 2 jet airliners going down every single day. How long do you think it would take for the American public, Judge, to cry out if there was 2 jet airliners hitting the ground and killing 150 people on board every day? You've stood strong against open borders. You've stood strong against Congress's willingness to give away taxpayer dollars. You've stood strong against some members who want to increase the size of government agencies. Can you say 87,000 IRS agents? You've stood strong against a big tech that was out of control and wanting protection from liability. And yes, as Russ and many others have pointed out, you've been a supreme fighter for defending religious rights, religious liberty. And you've been a supreme fighter against those who would turn America into a socialist country. And I can't enumerate that as well as you can and have done so eloquently over the years. But I want to thank you again. And now it's my pleasure to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman just north of me, Dr. Babin.
Thank you much. My good friend from both of these guys, great friends, Mr. Weber, Mr. Gohmert. This is a great tribute today to a great man. No one is more well known in the conservative world than Judge Louie Gohmert. And I'm very grateful to have served with him as my brother in the Texas delegation for the last 8 years since I was elected. It's no secret that Louie is a speaker of truth and a fighter for our freedoms. He is unapologetic in his principles and a true defender of the United States Constitution. As President Trump said, Louie has guts. He's as tough as hell. And isn't that the truth? But he's more than that. He's also a man of integrity, a veteran, a judge, a historian, a Bible scholar, a really fair preacher, a husband and a father. Judge Gohmert, my neighbor to the north, he represents the 1st District of Texas, and I represent the last district, the 36th District. And now that's changing as we've had redistricting, but I like to tell people that. He has fought tirelessly to preserve and protect our border and prosper the state of Texas. In a judiciary hearing a few months ago, Louie quoted George Orwell, saying, the author George Orwell, he said, "Free speech is my right to say what you don't want to hear." What a fitting quote for our friend, Louie Gohmert. You can count on Louie to be truthful. Sometimes he says what you don't want him to say, but he says it. If he believes it, he's a man of integrity and he stands his ground, and you can count on Louie Gohmert to be bold, and you can count on Louie to be fearless. There will be a great hole in this August body here without Louie Gohmert, and I imagine that it will really never be filled in the same way that it was. In a recent Louie Hour, my friend closed his time on the floor with the following words, and I'd like to do the same. He said, "I continue to have hope that springs eternal in the human breast, that we don't and won't lose the greatest freedom, the greatest country, the greatest gift of a country any people has ever received, and that it will not be our generation that sees it lost." So may God bless Louie Gohmert and his family, and we will miss you.
Thank the gentleman. I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Texas.
Well, I want to say, Mr. Speaker, what an honor it has been to serve alongside the great Louie Gohmert. And I'd watched him on television, as we say, for many years, fighting the fight for our freedom, for the Constitution, and for the values that make America so exceptional and so great. And I know I'm about to be gavelled, and I'm running out of time, so let me just say this. This man has the kind of grit and the kind of fight that this country and its country's leaders are going to need if we're going to restore freedom and return power to the people and resurrect the great United States of America. If we could just bottle a little bit of Louie Gohmert and force feed it to the members of this body, I believe we could get our great country back. God bless Louie Gohmert. God bless your family and all your future endeavors, and God bless America.
Thank you, brother.
The time of the gentleman of Texas has expired.